When I approached the pool, I never expected to be asked to leave. He didn't know who I was, and he didn't realize that my decision would change everything. But let's start from the beginning. Malcolm Larkin, an older man who had been a regular member of the elite club for many years, enjoyed the peace and solitude the pool offered. He felt at home here. The water, the chlorine, and the coolness always soothed his tired body. But as each year passed, it became harder for him to stick to his old habits. Today, it was especially difficult. The pain in his back was noticeable, but his body still craved movement. Swimming had become his only way to keep moving, despite his age. That morning, he thought the day would be just like any other. Early breakfast, a stroll around the club, and several hours in the water. The club had become more expensive and exclusive over the years, but Malcolm, despite this, still felt a sense of belonging in this cozy corner of the city. The high prices and elitism no longer bothered him. He knew he was safe here, and that was important. This was the only place in the world where his age, skin color, and social status didn't matter. As he approached the pool, the morning sun streaming through the club's glass windows created a relaxing atmosphere. The water's surface, with gentle waves, greeted him, and he could already feel his body relaxing when his gaze fell on the lifeguard, a young man in a spotless uniform standing by the edge of the pool. The lifeguard noticed him, but Malcolm paid little attention to the glance as he immersed himself in memories of his early training days when he first started visiting the club. However, as soon as he neared the poolside, preparing to dive in, the lifeguard suddenly approached him. The young man was no older than 20, with a lively and confident demeanor, radiating energy that seemed to match the entire pool. Without acknowledging Malcolm, the lifeguard looked him over briefly, then spoke with a hint of irritation. "Excuse me, sir, but you need to leave the pool. We don't allow people your age to stay for such a long time." Those words struck Malcolm like a stone thrown at his heart. He stopped, stunned by the suddenness of it. He had been coming here almost every day for the past several years. Here, in this place, everything had always seemed in its proper place. No one had ever noticed his age or appearance. But now, confronted by this young man, his calmness began to crack. He couldn't immediately understand what was wrong with the situation. Had he been expecting something different? He remained silent for a few seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. "Excuse me, are you serious?" he finally asked, a slight tension in his voice. "I was coming here before you were born. I come here every day. I've always swum here. And now I have to leave?" The lifeguard did not react to Malcolm's emotions. His face remained stern and his voice resolute. "We have rules, sir. I can't ignore them. You need to get out of the water." Malcolm felt the tension rising within him. He was stunned, unsure of what to do. What nonsense was this? He tried to process the absurdity of it all, staring at the lifeguard, feeling his esteemed place in the club crumbling before his eyes. But the young man didn't seem willing to compromise. "I'm not leaving. This is my place," Malcolm said, his voice losing some of its previous confidence. The lifeguard stood firm, not moving, not offering any alternative. Malcolm felt his face burning with shame and disappointment, but he was also filled with anger. Why should he have to explain himself? He was a club member. He belonged here. He had always paid his dues, and no one had the right to kick him out. This was his sanctuary, and this young man had no idea who he was dealing with. However, the young lifeguard seemed not to grasp the gravity of the situation. He repeated his demand, which only intensified Malcolm's sense of injustice. "I told you, you need to leave, or I'll have to call the manager." But Malcolm didn't move. He looked around, and though no one else was present, he felt as if every glance was on him. With every word from the lifeguard, his sense of belonging and calm disappeared, leaving only anger and anxiety. Had he lost all this? Malcolm couldn't believe it. "Fine," he said, finally deciding to hold back, "but I need to talk to someone. Who's your supervisor?" Malcolm was about to dive into the water when he felt the lifeguard's steps approaching. The young man's face was no longer adorned with the usual welcoming smile that all club staff carried, but instead showed wariness and suspicion. He stopped a few steps from Malcolm, scrutinizing his age. "Excuse me, sir," the lifeguard began, his tone firm, not giving Malcolm a chance to react. "You need to leave the pool. We don't allow people your age to stay for such a long time. It's against our rules." Malcolm froze. His gaze became hard, and his voice as cold as the water in the pool. "I've been coming here for many years, and there's never been any restriction for me. Why are you deciding who can swim and who can't?" The lifeguard, perhaps unaware of how his words sounded, repeated his demand without thinking of the possible consequences. "It's the club's rules, sir. We can't make exceptions. You need to leave the pool." The words were spoken with such certainty that Malcolm felt his pride begin to give way to doubt. He tried to make sense of the situation. How could a young man so calmly speak of rules that, to him, seemed like they should be flexible, especially for long-time club members? He looked into the lifeguard's eyes, trying to find even a hint of respect. There was nothing. This wasn't just a young man making a mistake. This was someone acting like a machine, performing his duties within a system. He was the living embodiment of a system that viewed black people as something foreign, something that needed to be controlled. "I'm not leaving," Malcolm said, clenching his fists. "This club belongs to me." The word "belongs" sounded like a challenge, but the lifeguard didn't react immediately. He simply stood still, not understanding what that could mean. His voice was still cold, but now there was a hint of uncertainty. "You... what?" he asked, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Malcolm saw the lifeguard step back, but he wasn't planning to stop. He finally realized that he wasn't just dealing with someone who didn't know who he was, but with a deeper issue, a system that judged and restricted people based on their age, race, and status. "I am the owner of this club," Malcolm repeated, unable to hold back his emotions. "This club was built with my money. I made it a place for everyone, but now it seems it's not for everyone. You don't understand who you're dealing with." A few words, spoken with such fury and pain, made the lifeguard retreat. He looked stunned. His face showed that he still couldn't comprehend the situation fully. He turned and glanced at the security guard standing at the other end of the pool. This was more than a misunderstanding. It was a conflict that couldn't be ignored. The lifeguard hesitated, then cleared his throat and returned to the conversation. "Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know who you were." Malcolm clenched his teeth. His heart raced with irritation, but his gaze was cold as ice. He felt the years of fighting against injustice and prejudice suddenly come to the forefront. This wasn't just a fight for the right to swim. It was a fight against prejudice and ignorance. Malcolm knew he couldn't let this incident go unchallenged. "If you want to apologize, it's not for me," he said. "Apologize to those who deal with this every day. I'm not just a person who can be kicked out of the pool on a whim. I'm the one who built this club for people like you and me. And if you think you can just absolve yourself of responsibility, you're wrong." Amidst the tension in the air, Malcolm stepped toward the lifeguard. He was ready for any outcome. But now he needed to do more than just demand respect. He had to show that his place here was not by accident. He, like everyone else, deserved equal treatment, and if he, the club owner, couldn't demand that, who else could? "You don't even understand what you've done," Malcolm said. "This isn't just a mistake. This is a system that makes people like you blind to reality. You never knew there were people like me who face this every day." The lifeguard looked at him, confused, but with a growing understanding. He realized that his words hadn't just hurt Malcolm, but had touched something important, something he may never have realized before. A real struggle. He knew he couldn't undo the mistake, but he also understood that perhaps he could learn from it. "Look, sir, I didn't mean to upset you. I thought I was just doing my job." Malcolm nodded, but the frustration didn't leave his chest. The lifeguard wasn't the problem. It was the system, the culture that had been ingrained in so many of them. This was a moment that would forever alter the course of both their lives. And while the struggle for change was far from over, it had begun with a single encounter at the pool.